Good morning, everyone. My name is Beth Blakely, and I want to thank you all for joining me for today's event, Back to School Injury Prevention, Playgrounds, and Child Pedestrian Safety. This webinar is hosted by the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute and is intended for teachers, educators, and community service providers that work with school-age children as well as caregivers of young children. I'll review a few housekeeping items before we begin this presentation. All participants' microphones are muted and your cameras are turned off. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, I'd ask that you use the Q&A box that is located in the bottom center of your Zoom Windows taskbar. There will be time at the end of the presentation for a short question and answer period. The chat box is also available if you have any comments or technical support questions during the presentation. My colleague Laura is joining us today and will be monitoring the chat and adding in useful links as we go along. Again, this webinar is being recorded. The recording, along with a copy of the presentation slides, will be emailed out to everyone that registered for the webinar. The recording will be available on the Prevention Institute website by the end of August. As a reminder, this webinar will provide you with practical tips to keep children safe from serious injuries on playgrounds and when crossing the street. Additionally, it will outline important aspects of child development and how this impacts a child's ability to remain safe in these environments. We know that the back-to-school season is an exciting time that brings a change in routines, more motorists on the roads, and children wanting to expand their skills and their desire for independence as they enter a new grade. I hope by the end of this webinar, you feel better prepared to identify hazards and potential playground risks, as well as feel confident in supporting children as they learn to safely, effectively, and consistently navigate crosswalks and crossing the street. Our newly revised Playground Safety Fact Sheet and Child Pedestrian Safety Fact Sheet will be featured during the presentation. These will also be included in the follow-up email sent with the webinar recording and presentation slides. Before we begin the presentation, I'd like to take a moment to orientate everyone to the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute and acknowledge our privilege in sharing and working on these traditional lands. The Saskatchewan Prevention Institute provides services to all those living on treaty lands 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10, the ancestral territories of the Nahiawak, Nahithawak, Nahinawak, Anishinaabeg, Nakaway, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, Dene, and the homeland of the Métis. We recognize that these lands are currently inhabited by Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, including many other First Nations and Inuit peoples. We acknowledge the importance of the treaties, the lasting impacts of colonization, and the continued inequities experienced. We are dedicated to moving forward on a shared path of reconciliation and partnership. We are all treaty people and are grateful to live, work, and play on this land. So I was very excited this morning to see that there are people registered for this webinar from all across Turtle Island. So I would invite everyone to take a moment, reflect on the ceded or unceded territories that you're joining us from, and think about your relationship, not only with the First Peoples of these lands, but also your connection with the land itself, the water, the air, the plants, and the animals. And while I do this, I'd also invite attendees, if you would like to, please share your name, your job title, and your location in the chat. Wonderful. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, my name is Beth Blakely, and I am pleased to be your presenter for this webinar. So a little bit about me, I have a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Saskatchewan and have worked in the nonprofit field for over a decade. I've been with the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute for almost 7 years now in a variety of roles, and I've been working as the Child Injury Prevention Program Coordinator for over a year now. I am a mom to an energetic and very creative 6-year-old boy, soon to be 7, and he is gearing up to head into grade 2 in September. And then my partner, John, he is the final piece of my home fire, and his community is One Arrow First Nation. So that's a little bit about me. I also am a very proud auntie to many, many amazing nieces and nephews. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute, I wanted to share a video that just provides a brief overview of our organization.
Think about the role you play in creating environments and opportunities that support children, youth, and families. As a provincial nonprofit organization, we support service providers, educators, and communities to increase the health and well-being of children, from preconception through childhood. At the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute, this vision has guided us since 1980. We offer more than just information. Our unique approach turns research and evidence into practical, easy-to-use resources that will inform your work and can be shared with families and communities. We also provide education and training opportunities on a wide range of topics to help you stay at the forefront of best practices in your field. Visit us online to learn more about how we can support you in building healthier communities across Saskatchewan.
Imagine a world where every child grows up healthy, safe, and able to achieve their full potential.
Our goal is healthy children.
So as you can see from this slide, the Prevention Institute works in a wide variety of areas, including early childhood mental health, perinatal and infant health, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder prevention, child passenger safety, child development and parenting through our Community Action Program for Children, or CAPC, as well as our Nobody's Perfect Parenting Program. And we also have a sexual and reproductive health program at the Prevention Institute. So my program, the Child Injury Prevention Program, works to help children thrive through primary prevention. So we know that the most serious injuries in children are both predictable and preventable. The goal of my program is to raise awareness of injury risks and best practices to reduce the number of injury-related deaths in children. It also aims to decrease the occurrence of injury-related deaths and life-altering injuries in children in Saskatchewan. My position covers a wide variety of topics such as falls, water safety, brain injury and concussions, unintentional poisonings, risk and play, child pedestrian safety and playground safety, and more. Funding for the Child Injury Prevention Program is through the Acquired Brain Injury Partnership Project, the Saskatchewan Ministry of Health, and SGI. So without further ado, here is the outline for the remaining time we have together. So we'll start by learning about why children are susceptible to injuries and why they're at a greater risk of sustaining a serious injury. I will then talk about the importance of supervision. Next, I'll cover information related to playground safety. This will include a brief overview of risk and play and defining hazards versus risks. We'll learn about the 3 most common types of playground-related injuries, the Canadian Playground Safety Standards, and I'll provide some playground safety tips. Next, we'll look at the normal cognitive and physical development in children and how this can impact a child's ability to stay safe when crossing a street. I'll provide some recommendations for teaching child pedestrian safety, outline the skills needed to safely and consistently cross the street, and provide some step-by-step instructions for how to cross a street. And then finally, we'll end the presentation with a short question and answer period. As a reminder, key information from this presentation can be found in our playground safety fact sheet as well as our child pedestrian safety fact sheets. Both of these can be downloaded online, and you are more than welcome to photocopy them to distribute them to families or colleagues. I've also included a link to our resource catalog for anyone interested in seeing what other resources we have available from all of our programs. Okay, so as we all know, children are naturally curious and they learn by using their senses to interact with the world around them. Children differ from adults in many ways, including some important physical and cognitive characteristics. These differences are why children are more susceptible to injuries and why they're at a greater risk of sustaining a serious injury. It's important that we remember that children are not just small adults. So, for example, a child's head, they are much larger and heavier compared to the rest of their bodies. This can affect their balance and increase their risk of a fall. A child's bones, they're still growing and maturing. So that means less force is needed to cause a sprain, a fracture, or even a break. Children's bodies, they're also constantly working on their coordination and balance, especially in those earlier years, and as their bodies grow and their muscles mature. Cognitively, we know that children typically process information at a slower rate than adults, especially when there's multiple pieces of information involved. Their problem solving skills are not as great because they are still developing the skill and they may find problem solving to be quite difficult. Children also do not always understand that they may be seriously injured by things in their environment. These, coupled with a child's curiosity for the world, can sometimes lead them to get into dangerous situations. It takes time and experience for a child to be able to identify hazards, assess risks of a situation, make a plan and determine their next steps, as well as understand cause and effect. So these are more complex skills that need to be taught, repeated, and reinforced with practice. At the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute, we want everyone to know that injuries are not accidents. The words we use matter, especially when we're talking about childhood injuries. So, an injury, that is damage to the body. It can be visible, such as a broken arm or a cut on the body, or invisible, like a concussion. Injuries can be life-altering and can impact not only a person's quality of life, but how they interact with the world. In contrast, an accident is an unexpected and unintentional event that may result in damage. The word accident is used to describe events that happen by chance or without an apparent or deliberate cause. The reason we do not use the word accident to describe injuries to children is because it implies that nothing can be done to prevent the event from occurring. However, we know that the most serious childhood injuries are in fact predictable and they can be prevented. Injuries often happen when caregivers are not directly and actively supervising their children. For young children in particular, the best and most effective strategy to reduce the frequency and the severity of all types of injuries is direct and active supervision. Direct supervision means that the caregiver is within arm's reach and looking at the child. Active supervision means that there are no distractions and the caregiver's focus is only on the child. Now, it's easy to say that a caregiver needs to actively supervise children, but as parents and caregivers, we know that in real life we have competing priorities that pull our attention in every direction. So the goal of supervision is to find that right combination of physical closeness to the child and attention to what the child is doing. This combination will change depending on the child, their age, and the activity, and if you have multiple kids that you're supervising. It's also important to remember that minor injuries like bumps and bruises will happen. They are a normal part of growing up, and our goal is not to bubble wrap our children. What we want to focus on is preventing those injuries that are serious in nature and could impair a child's ability to go to school, to play, or alter their overall quality of life. Risk in play, especially unstructured outdoor play, is essential for healthy childhood development. This type of play often involves some element of risk. As parents and caregivers, it is our responsibility to manage hazards in the environment while supporting children in learning to manage risk. So what is a hazard? Well, a hazard is a danger in the environment that could seriously injure a child. The key feature of a hazard is that it cannot always be recognized by a child. So examples may include broken playground equipment, missing or loose playground parts, a rotten wooden play structure, or even a tree, as well as a paddling pool or a pond that doesn't have a secure fence. On the other hand, risks are a challenge or an uncertainty in the environment that can be recognized and navigated by a child. So risk-taking is important. It helps children in a variety of ways. So it allows them to test their physical abilities, but it also helps them to develop their perceptual motor capacity and learn to avoid and adjust in potentially dangerous environments and activities. And it's important to note that not all children will be able to recognize and successfully navigate the same risks as their peers. These abilities are developed through experience, repetition, and support. So a risk could include anything from a playground balance beam or monkey bars, climbing or jumping at new heights, play wrestling, or even biking at a greater speed than they've experienced before. So I do not have time today to go into detail about the benefits of unstructured outdoor play, the different types of risk, as well as how caregivers can support risky play for children of all ages and abilities. But I did want to include this phenomenal resource. So I highly recommend that folks read it. It is the 2024 position statement from the Canadian Pediatric Society on outdoor risky play. And there is a link as well to that for everyone. Playgrounds and outdoor play spaces are important because they offer children a new environment to explore as they play, learn, grow, and develop their sensory motor skills, as well as their social skills. When a playground is safe, children are able to play without restrictions and they're able to experience risks at their own pace and test the boundaries of their abilities. In Saskatchewan, playground injuries are one of the leading causes of hospitalization for children aged 1 to 9. The equipment most commonly associated with injuries include monkey bars, slides, swings, and seesaws. So I've organized the most common types of playground injuries into 3 categories: falls, entanglements and entrapments, and other minor injuries. So first, falls. Falls happen in an instant and they can occur from many locations on or around a playground. Falls and bumps on hard playground equipment, the ground, or even a collision with another child can result in a wide variety of injuries. Children can experience minor bumps and bruises, broken bones, or mild concussions, but they can also experience serious fall-related injuries such as skull fractures and acquired brain injuries. The second type of injury is entanglements and entrapments. So these are another common playground-related injury. Again, the severity of these types of injuries can range from minor to serious. Entrapment may occur if a child's head, neck, or other body parts become trapped in a small space in the playground. Entanglements occur when a child wearing loose clothing becomes tangled in a small space in the playground equipment. Entanglement can also occur if the child is wearing a scarf or has another item such as a rope tied around parts of their body. Entanglements can lead to strangulation, choking, and other serious injuries. And the last type of playground-related injury is minor injuries. So these are the most frequent type of injuries that children experience on playgrounds and outdoor play structures. This includes things like bumps, pinches, cuts, scrapes, bruises, splinters, and a lot of other minor abrasions. Hot surfaces during the summer months can also cause what is known as thermal burns. So these thermal burns, there's actually some ways that we can reduce them. So making sure that there is shade on the playground equipment, and this can be through canopies or trees. Moving small plastic play structures to low sun exposure areas. We can also select lightly colored play structures that reduce heat absorption, but the biggest thing that we can do is to actually just limit playground use during these extreme temperatures. A safe playground design allows children to jump, climb, balance, and fall without a risk of serious injury. Playground standards are beneficial in a number of ways. They outline age-appropriate use of equipment and address engineering-related issues, such as structural integrity, protective surfacing, construction, and even proper installation. In Canada, the Canadian Standards Association has produced a document known as the National Standard of Canada, Children's Playground Equipment and Surfacing. So the CSA Z614-20. So this document was last updated in 2020, and in addition to outlining the age restrictions and these engineering related recommendations, it also includes important information on design, maintenance, and inspection considerations for these public playgrounds and equipment. The standard also outlines recommendations for inclusive design for children with physical disabilities and considerations for managing extreme temperatures. So again, ways to reduce injuries that are caused by thermal burns. So it's important to note that this standard is voluntary. And for most playground and indoor playground settings, equipment manufacturers and installers actually will often refer to the standards that are published in the United States. And this is through the American Society for Testing and Materials, or the ASTM. So the ASTM, they have a voluntary standard as well, and that is for home playgrounds. This standard is called the Standard Consumer Safety Performance Specification for Home Playground Equipment. And many of the ready-to-assemble playsets that are sold in Canada actually do comply with the ASTM safety standards. So for any of those that are interested in purchasing a copy of the Canadian Children's Playground Equipment and Surfacing Standard, I have also included a link to that in this slide. Now, this next slide provides a bunch of specific measurements for safe playground safety designs, and it reflects the recommendations that are outlined in the Canadian Children's Playground Equipment and Surfacing Standard. So I'm not going to be going over all this information during today's webinar, but I did want to include it for any of the folks that will be downloading or printing off the presentation slides. And as well, all of this information, so the distancing requirements for the different types of play structures and different pieces of it, all of this information is found on the back side of our playground safety fact sheet. Now I will provide some safety tips to help keep kids safe from serious injuries while on playgrounds and outdoor play structures. So first, all outdoor playgrounds should have a protective ground cover. This could be sand, pea gravel, wood chips, or shredded rubber. For high traffic areas, such as under swings and at the base of slides, add more surfacing when necessary. You can also rake the surfacing to make sure that it stays loose and is free from debris. Newer playgrounds may have a solid, cushiony rubber surfacing. So this poured protective surface is becoming quite popular because not only is it safe, but it also provides improved accessibility for folks that are in wheelchairs, have crutches, or any other additional supports for their mobility. It is not recommended that playgrounds are located directly on grass or on packed dirt. Number 2, playground play structures should always have a separate play space for children under the age of 5. Young children cannot safely navigate the larger and more complex play structures, and they're at risk of collisions or falls if an older child is sharing the space with them. Children under the age of 5 as well, they require constant and active supervision. And some of these children, they may be capable climbers, but we also want to remind caregivers not to help them climb higher than they feel comfortable going, because this can result in injuries. Number 3, we want to examine the equipment for loose joints, open chains, sharp edges, exposed nails or bolts, as well as rust. So this includes looking at the handrails, protective barriers, and the guardrails as well. Home playground equipment is usually lighter than playground equipment that we see in the public. So what we want to do is make sure that it is anchored to prevent it from tipping over or collapsing, and ensuring that these anchors are covered or hidden so that they don't become a tripping hazard. And we also want to remind folks that home playgrounds, make sure that you're always following the manufacturer's instructions to make sure you're properly anchoring that equipment. Next, number 4, we want to check for splinters, wood decay, and cracks, making repairs as needed. And if you come across a public playground that is in need of repairs, notify the school or the community association, and hopefully they will be able to address that for you. Number 5, we're going to survey the playground and the surrounding play space for any hazards. So this may include broken glass, exposed tree roots, discarded needles or garbage, or even broken equipment. So what we want to do is pick up any glass or garbage before the child plays. And if the child is old enough, you may want to teach them to stay away from sharps and other protocols with that. Number 6, we want to teach children safe playground behaviors. So this includes waiting their turn, going down the slide one at a time and feet first, not standing at the base of slides or in front of swings, using handrails, not climbing on guardrails, and keeping their fingers away from moving parts. And finally, if there is any open water in or around a playground or play structure, such as a paddling pool or even a pond, we want to have fencing, as well as a locking and self-closing door all the way around that body of water. So another important aspect of playground safety is ensuring children are wearing the appropriate clothing. Some of the tips on the previous slide related to maintenance, repairs, all of that, it may not be something that you're able to contribute to, especially if it is a public playground or play structure. However, when it comes to children's clothing, there's a lot of simple things that we can do, and everyone can be involved in making sure that kids are wearing appropriate clothing when they're on playgrounds. So the first one that I wanted to highlight is in the winter, we want to be removing scarves when we're playing on playgrounds. So if possible, opt for one of the tubular neck warmers, or if that's not possible, really secure the ends of the scarf into the child's jacket to reduce the risk of strangulation. Next, we want to remove drawstrings, cords, straps, and strings from the child's clothing. Again, these can catch on the playground equipment and pose a risk of entanglement or strangulation. We want to pay close attention to areas where clothing might be caught. So this could include the tops of slides, if there's any S-shaped hooks on swings, the joints of climbers, as well as any nearby fencing. Next, helmets. So at the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute, we love to see children wearing helmets, but helmets should always be removed before you are playing on a playground. So helmets are larger than a child's head and their body. So that means that a child may become trapped in a space that they could normally fit through. Helmets can also pose a choking hazard if the strap remains fastened. So we want to make sure that we're storing helmets along with their bikes, scooters, skateboards in a low traffic area off of the playground. Next, removing necklaces and loose jewelry that may get tangled on the playground equipment. Similar to helmets, large rings can also become lodged in a small space that the child's fingers can normally pass through. So we want to make sure those are all removed. Next, don't allow children to play with skipping ropes, ribbons, or other accessories on playgrounds. These items may cause children to trip and fall or to get twisted in the playground equipment parts. In fact, we want to keep all toys off of the playgrounds to ensure that they don't become tripping hazards. And finally, it's best practice for all children to wear comfortable footwear that covers both their toes and their heels. So this reduces the likelihood of minor injuries to the feet, as well as injuries that could be caused by slips and falls on or off the playground. So now we're going to switch gears. We're going to move from playground safety to child pedestrian safety. So we know that in 2022, there were 39 child pedestrians that were injured or killed in Saskatchewan. As I mentioned earlier, children are not just small adults. These cognitive and physical differences not only make children more susceptible to injury, but they also play an important role in a child's ability to safely and confidently and consistently cross the street. Children tend to focus on one thing at a time and can be easily distracted from the task at hand, even if a child has been taught the correct way to cross a street. And even if they have been taught the correct way, they may still have difficulties processing all of the different pieces of information needed to do so safely. Children can also be impulsive and are still developing their problem-solving skills and their understanding for risks and consequences. So for these reasons, children under the age of 10 should always be accompanied by an adult, or if that's not possible, an older, responsible child when crossing the street. Physically, children's height and size, as well as their vision and their hearing, have important differences from that of an adult or teenager. A child's small structure can cause visibility issues in traffic for both the child and motorists. Children may not be able to see oncoming traffic because they can't see over and around obstacles, such as parked cars, shrubs, or trees. A child may also think that if they see a car, that the driver also sees them, which is not always the case. A child's smaller size also leads to more serious injuries if there was a collision with a vehicle. Next, a child's peripheral vision is not fully developed. So this means that a child looking straight ahead may not be able to detect movement to either side. So we want to really reinforce that children do look fully left and look fully right, turning their head, not just using their eyes. Next, children's hearing. So again, this is still developing. A child may find it difficult to determine the direction of sounds or even recognize the sound of an approaching vehicle. Being a good role model is one of the best ways for young children to begin learning about pedestrian safety and reinforce road safety habits for later in life. We can demonstrate and reinforce how to cross the street safely to children and teach them the skills needed to identify potential risks and hazards in the environment. Now, it's important to remind children to always stop, think, look, and listen before they cross the street. Driveways, alleyways, and parking lots should also be treated like roads, and children should remain alert to potential motorists. We can also help children learn about pedestrian safety by pointing out different street signs and pedestrian traffic signals and discussing their meaning. As children grow, it is also important to have ongoing discussions about how to stay safe and when they encounter a new situation. So this may include witnessing someone jaywalking, walking in an unfamiliar area, walking on grid roads, the impact of earbuds on hearing the traffic or other potential hazards, perhaps crossing a street when there is decreased visibility, such as during a rainstorm or a snowstorm, as well as how slippery and icy roads impact not only the time but the space needed for a vehicle to come to a complete stop. And I also wanted to highlight and remind everyone that U-turns are illegal in front of schools and in school zones. You can ask schools to remind parents of this law at the beginning of the school year, or even make signs to remind the public that U-turns are not allowed and can actually be very dangerous for children and caregivers trying to cross the street, as it's much more difficult to predict where a vehicle is going. Between the ages of 9 and 11, children begin to make better judgments, process multiple pieces of information at one time, develop more refined motor coordination skills, become less impulsive, and are more conscious of the risks and consequences of their actions. So there are 3 key skills that a child must be able to consistently do in order to safely cross the street on their own. So first, the child needs to be able to determine the safest crossing path and be able to use it. So this often means using a marked crosswalk or following the pedestrian traffic signals at intersections. Second, we want the child to be able to assess the speed of an approaching vehicle. In elementary school zones across the province, the speed limit is 30 kilometers per hour between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. However, some motorists may forget that these speed limits are in effect, especially over summer months, during the holidays, and outside of regular school hours. Children need to be aware when a motorist is traveling at a different speed. So this helps the child recognize when a vehicle is slowing down or when a vehicle is traveling too fast. So perhaps meaning that the motorist is distracted or unaware of the speed limits. The faster the vehicle is traveling, the more time and space is needed for it to come to a complete stop, and with even more time and space required if the road conditions are not ideal. And lastly, the child needs to be able to make correct judgments about safe gaps in traffic. So if a child is not crossing the street at a controlled intersection, they will need to be able to determine how much time is needed to safely cross the street and whether gaps in between vehicles will provide ample time for them to make it across the street. The last thing that we're going to cover during this webinar is some step-by-step instructions for how to safely cross the street. This is a great tool that you can use almost as a checklist for young kids who are learning to cross the street, but you can also use it with older kids to reinforce those safety habits and to make sure that they're following all the steps needed to cross safely every single time. So the first thing that we're going to be looking for, one, we want to identify the safest crossing path. So when possible, we want to always choose a marked crosswalk or follow a pedestrian traffic signal at a controlled intersection. If your school has a crossing guard, that's also a great place for children to be crossing the street. Number 2, we're going to stop at the curb. We're going to stay on the sidewalk as opposed to stopping on the roadway. Number 3, we're going to listen for the sound of vehicles approaching. As a child gets older, you may start looking out for bicycles, scooters, e-bikes, all of that. But for now, we're just going to focus on vehicles. Number 4, we're going to look left. We're going to make sure that the child is fully turning their head to the left as opposed to just using their eyes, because we know, again, that their peripheral vision is not fully developed. When we look left, we're going to see if there's any vehicles approaching in the left traffic lane. Number 5, we're going to look right. Again, fully turning that head to the right to make sure that you can see everything on the right-hand side of you. So we're looking for vehicles approaching in the right traffic lane. Number 6, we're going to look left again to make sure that there are still no vehicles approaching. If you are at a 4-way intersection, you want to also make sure that you're turning your head back and looking over your shoulder to make sure that you can see if there's any cars coming from behind you. And you'll also need to look forward to make sure that you're able to see if there's any vehicles coming from in front of you. Number 7, if vehicles are present and stop, you want to make eye contact with each driver. This ensures that they see you and that you know that they have seen you as well. Number 8, again, if vehicles are present, we want to make sure that all vehicles have come to a complete stop before you begin to cross the street. Again, if road conditions are not ideal, it may take a bit longer for a vehicle to stop. Number 9, if you're at a pedestrian crosswalk, you want to wait until all vehicles have stopped before you cross. We do not recommend that you start crossing as vehicles are slowing down, especially at pedestrian crosswalks where there isn't any of the street lights. And number 10, finally, we want to carefully cross the street. We're going to be making sure that we walk at a steady pace and make sure you continue to keep your eyes and ears open for additional signs of traffic. This is also a great place to remind older children to make sure that they're not crossing the street looking at their phone or with earbuds in, again, so that they're able to keep their eyes and their ears open for any of those additional signs of traffic. And again, we always want to remind children to stop, think, look, and listen when they're going to cross the street. So with that, we have come to the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for your attention. I will just take a look here at the chat and the question and answer and see if we had any questions from folks. So it looks like we do have one. Someone is asking if I have any recommendations for videos or for books. So I can't think of any books offhand, but I do have a list of books available through the Saskatchewan Public Library. So what I can do is I will go and take a look at my list and see what I can find related to playground and child pedestrian safety, and I'll include a list of those in my follow-up email to folks. And then in terms of videos, the one that comes to mind is, it's a longer video, it's about 15 minutes long. It was developed in the United States, and it joins kind of a character named Petey as he learns about kind of the rules of the road and how to stay safe when walking out in the community and crossing streets safely. So I'll include that one as well. And if I can find any other videos that I think folks would really enjoy, then I will make sure to include those in the follow-up email as well. Just see if there's any more. Okay, so with that, if you do have questions, feel free to follow up with me, and I'm more than happy to answer your questions. So again, thank you so much for joining me today and learning about playground and child pedestrian safety. When you close this window, you'll be directed to a link where you can complete a short survey of the webinar. Completing the evaluation helps the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute to create programming and resources that support you in your work, and we really appreciate the time it takes you to complete it. As a reminder, I will send out a copy of the presentation slides, the 2 fact sheets, the webinar recording, as well as that list of books and videos to everyone that has registered for this event in the next week or so. Thanks again and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.